It's like we got a million people.
And welcome to the RGB Show.
The show where R, G, and B meet.
Not really many tech topics this week to talk about.
Apple, let's talk about Apple for 3 hours straight. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong stream.
What I'm mad with people is how you do push-ups.
Pretty much the only real news story this week was Epic Games lawsuit against.
My favourite tech company in existence.
Well, actually, two. Both Android and Apple have both been hit with a lawsuit.
Yeah, but I can't hate Google. So.
Mainly because of the fact that obviously they're Play Stores and they're a monopoly.
Yeah, it's been very. It was very fun to see. I'm loving all the 13-year-olds with all of their hashtag
Free Fortnite.
Well, I mean, they obviously pretty much were already prepped, ready to go with the whole lawsuit.
It would have been months in advance, I reckon, at this point.
They planned it. They planned it right around this time because of the whole, antitrust investigation into the big major tech companies. So you've got, Amazon, Apple, Google, and Facebook, all essentially currently being investigated. So because they're being investigated at the moment, this is the perfect time to sort of spring this onto, the tech companies, basically to get the conversation, sort of into obviously Epic Games in this case's favour. But I mean also consumers' favour too, because the biggest thing is you've got to understand is that, if those tech companies have to pay more to put their game on the Apple Play Store and onto the Google Google Play Store and Apple's App Store, that extra cost, less money goes back in development, less money goes back into the actual products themselves, and also they have to obviously raise the price to cover those costs. They're not in business to essentially make a loss, that's for sure. They're there to make a profit. So, that is the way that it works. At the end of the day, if they're not making a profit, then, there's no point being in business.
Mm-hmm. Well, as they said on the WAN show, things like Floatplane, where they actually have overhead that affects them greatly if it doesn't get covered. They're the ones that get affected by the cut, not so much the likes of Epic Games. But Epic Games has the footing and the ability to sue Apple for it.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's one of those situations where, this was a long time coming. I mean, as far as it goes, it's one of those situations where these companies have had a monopoly in the whole app market for quite some time. Less so on Android than obviously iOS. iOS, you can't sideload apps, you can't go to a different app store. With the advantage you've got with Android is that there are other app stores out there. I mean, as far as it goes, I am aware that some of these apps are actually available through, Samsung's Galaxy App Store, which is obviously pre-installed on a lot of the Samsung devices. Mm-hmm. There's other app stores as well. I mean, it makes it more difficult when those app stores aren't readily available. But yeah, as far as it goes, it is an interesting situation, that's for sure.
Yeah. Because I know they Epic Games presented them with the lawsuit. Is it being released? What's in it?
It was a 60-page document that was basically slapped on their desk the day that they took the apps off the App Store. They basically filed. And it was one of those situations where they pretty much had the app set up so that they would breach, essentially, the terms of service. Because the apps actually offloaded you to their own payment portals.
Well, you could choose.
And they actually had different pricing for iOS, you had to pay X dollars for their own direct payment portal was actually cheaper, which again is broken terms of service. But I mean, they did that to show that, you know, the reason why you paying more is not necessarily because the app actually costs more in theory. It's just the platform that you're accessing it through. And I mean, it's one of those situations where the iPhone market is a huge market, so you don't want to lose that market, just to go down the path of
Number 6.
yeah, that's it. You know, it's you don't want to lose that market just because, you know, they want to be, you know, difficult. That market's a huge market, so it'll be interesting to see how that actually pans out in the future.
I know my only grief with their tactics so far is putting that trailer in the game. Like, not so much the trailer, was it like the short in the game, and having it like weaponizing their community in a sense.
Yeah,
And they also
it's funny because the actual short that they put into the actual game was actually based on an ad that Apple actually had against, back in the early 1980s, against the essentially IBM PC master race, and how that they were essentially, you know, controlling the market, so to speak. And then you look at the situation now, and I mean, it's one of those situations where you've got Apple essentially doing exactly the same situation. I mean, they control pretty much most of the portable device market now. They set trends, they set, sort of the expectations. I mean, they're ecosystems that close that, like, I mean, the port on the device itself actually costs you a licensing fee to develop products to support that particular port. If you want to build a dock that has a lightning connection, it actually has to cost you a licensing fee. Which, I mean, as far as it goes, with obviously other branded smartphones, that's not a concern because they use an open Type-C standard. So it's one of those things where even the port on the device itself is locked down.
What were you going to say, Billy?
They said that if they don't win, then they're not going to release the next season of Fortnite. So it's...
Oh, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's what... When you said they were weaponizing the community...
Yeah.
We just lost you.
No, we're all good.
Oh.
You just stopped talking?
Huh? No.
What is this?
Just making sure the stream's working fine.
Yeah, I got it on my phone.
Oh, cool. You're the one viewer then.
Yeah.
Oh, should I say 1,000 viewers?
Yes. Why is the key so big? What the hell? Bro, this lock must be huge. Don't tell me it's just to get into his office. Imagine having that in your key ring. Get into the house.
So yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, from my perspective, it's one of those situations where I do think that we are going to have a situation very soon where I think that these companies are going to have to rethink the way that they deal with, the app side of things. Whether or not they spin those off as separate businesses, becoming independent from their actual main business, I don't know. I don't know if that's a possibility. They might be able to have a stake in the business, but actually not necessarily be controlling the business itself.
It's going to be like Windows. It's going to have to have 20 launches just to have the apps that you want.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a difficult situation because, I mean, you just don't know what solution there is. I mean, at the end of the day, you don't want to go down the path of, having a less desirable experience on your device because of the fact that you've got these apps that literally, exploit your phone with, all sorts of malware, adware, I mean, tracking everything that you're currently doing in the background. You don't want, to compromise the integrity of the experience, but you also don't want to have a situation where you've got that monopoly. Now, I mean,
Is that a gun?
I mean, as far as it goes, it's going to be one of those situations where I think it's going to have to be a bit of a balancing act, whether or not they go down the path of allowing, the Google Play Store available on iOS.
Right.
And then obviously having the Apple Play Store available on Google. I mean, they've done it already for other other apps. Like, I mean, you look at the music apps that they've got. You can get Apple Music on iOS and on Android. You can get, obviously, Google Music on iOS and Android. So whether or not they go down the path of having a situation where that becomes the norm, where you can have the option of using Google services on iOS as well as Apple's own service, or I mean, it still makes a duopoly, but I mean, at least it does give customers choice, makes it more competitive, because I mean, at the end of the day, you've got then a choice as to which store you're using. It's going to be a difficult situation. I don't really see there to be a
thing I found super confusing. Right, so Float Plan, right, wasn't allowed to have subscriptions, like a portal that you can go and log in and pay subscriptions and stuff. But Netflix, you pay for a Netflix subscription, you don't have to pay the Netflix subscription through Apple. You can still log in on the app. Same with Spotify.
Yeah.
So what's
Curiosity Stream, Nebula.
Yeah, what's the difference?
Yeah, but I believe that if you go through the actual iOS device, that you actually are paying Apple the monthly fee, and they actually are taking a cut. It's technically not necessarily the actual cost structure itself as such. It's the fact that you have to charge the same amount as other platforms.
Yeah.
You can't charge more, and whatever you're charging, they take a 30% cut. No questions asked.
But like, my thing is with Netflix, they can have. Obviously, you log into Netflix and it's signing you in. But if you say have Float Plan or something like that, they're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, I don't know the ins and outs of the Float Plane app. Again, I mean, it's one of those situations where it could come down to some sort of favoritism.
Yeah.
You don't. They're not allowed to discuss it because it's under NDA. So even if you do go down the path of getting a deal through Apple, there's nothing you can actually talk about, because they'll lock it out. They'll lock you down to the point where you won't be able to talk about how much it's costing you and all that sort of stuff.
All right, let's go.
But I mean, it's one of those situations where the iOS experience itself. I mean, I personally don't own and never will own Apple devices, and that's just mainly because I like to customize my device. I like to choose which keyboard I use, and I like to choose which launcher I use, and I like to be able to sideload certain apps, because I mean, I don't necessarily use apps. Not that the apps have got anything wrong with them. It's just that for example, my device doesn't have essentially the launcher that I like. So I use a different launcher. I like to use a specific dialer for my phone. I don't like the one that's pre-installed. And I can't download that particular dialer through the App Store. So I sideload it. So it allows me to block spam calls and stuff like that. And the one that comes default doesn't allow that functionality as easily. The Messenger service, I don't like the default messaging app, so I sideload a different messaging app on my phone. I can't do that with iOS. There's no option to do any of that with an iOS device. I customize my phone pretty extensively with about a dozen different sideloaded apps. The camera, for example, I don't like the camera app that comes into my phone, so I sideload a different camera app. That's just how and that's because I like to tweak things. I like to get it to, a situation where the phone does what I want it to do, not necessarily what the company that sold me the phone tells me it should be doing. Mm-hmm. I like to have that flexibility to make it my own. I mean, you guys are probably the same. I mean, you probably have got apps on your phone that you've gotten used to. And
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, even like when back in the Pokemon card game came out on on Android, it was only available for tablets, but it worked perfectly fine on bigger phones. But I couldn't get it from the App Store, so I just downloaded the APK, ran it, and it works fine.
yeah,
And I don't want to be locked into only having apps that are compatible in certain regions. Like, I can get around that by just downloading the APK.
yeah. But yeah, the average user's never going to be able to do that sort of stuff. They're not going to have that knowledge unless, they've either looked at some sort of, tech guide or whatever. But for the most part, the average,
Was that
average
you?
user
Oh,
isn't
shit,
gonna
sorry, Carl.
isn't gonna know which way to go in terms of getting that sort of thing happening. So it's going to be an interesting situation, that's for sure.
Did he just die?
Thinking that he just teleports to the police station.
But I mean, this just goes beyond that too. Like, I mean, as far as it goes, we are aware of obviously it affecting, Epic Games. But I think Microsoft's also looking at taking Apple to court because they've just blocked the Xbox Game Pass app on their devices as well.
For the stupidest of reasons.
And they want to verify every single game that's listed in that app individually. I mean, that's over 100 different games that need to be verified. And they can't be all in one launcher. They have to be separately installed through the App Store itself. So instead of just basically getting a 30% cut of the Xbox Game Pass, every single game in the App Store has to be paid for separately and loaded separately and verified separately. That just adds a totally different dimension. Now, whether or not it's just proprietary, anti-competitive tactics from Apple, with their own, game service on their device that they don't want to obviously, risk, having a
risk competition.
Yeah, that's it. Having that monopoly there currently, and having someone come in with better games, more games. And the ability to cross-play against multiple different devices. I don't think they've been kicked out of the Google Play Store though, from what I've been led to believe. But yeah, they were definitely kicked out of Apple's Play Store. So I mean, Microsoft themselves will probably also add some weight to the whole.
Well, depending how this lawsuit goes.
Well, I mean, technically
jump-on
Microsoft will
effect.
probably even join it, and it might even be some sort of like class action.
Yeah.
Situation. They might actually join forces. I mean, at the end of the day, that's two big power weights in technically the tech space that throw their weight
Epic
behind.
and Microsoft at it again. They're the team that you're going to want to win. They can have their because they could combine forces as a duo and have their own theme tune and everything.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's one of those situations where I mean, as much as they're technically competitors to some extent. Microsoft's not going to really some of the Microsoft sort of software. I mean, my vibe from Microsoft at the moment is more of a software first company when it comes to gaming. Building the games rather than and focus on the games themselves more so than the haptic feedback on the console's controller and trying to create new gaming experiences. They're just sort of customers are already know how, I mean, most of those sort of experiences are more gimmicky anyway, for the most part. I mean, the only thing that's really sort of taken off is VR. And I mean, even that's still very early in its infancy. I mean, the whole Wii sort of situation when we were interacting with how consoles back then, that sort of was a completely different experience. But you look at it now, and I mean, hardly anybody has anything interacts with their consoles in the same way
As Microsoft.
Well, just like the whole using the controller as the essentially
Using you as the controller. Well,
you as the
other
controller
than
sort of concept.
VR games, no.
Well, just in general, without VR, that's sort of died out.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
of course.
I mean, there's still the ability to do it with, I think, the Switch.
Oh yeah, but it doesn't really get utilized in very many games.
Not to the extent that it used to be. Yeah, I mean, it was very big when the Wii first came out. That's what sold that console. You know, the fact that you could
Play golf.
do bowling and stuff with it and all that sort of stuff. And I mean, that's what most people sort of bought the console based on, was that it was more of a workout device to some extent than it was an actual console. And a lot of parents bought it because it meant that their kids weren't sitting on their ass doing nothing. You know, they were actually up and moving.
Oh, bro, I remember when I was younger, my one of my best mates, his mum made him sell his PS2 to buy the Wii. Oh, how devastating it was for him.
You know, and I mean, as far as it goes, that sort of concept, I think, changed it for a little bit. But then, of course, you know, the amount of TVs that got... the amount of TVs that got damaged...
Sorry, he's seeing this, Andy.
I am seeing this. Small things.
You're having so much fun. I want to turn. But yes, lots of TVs.
Getting damaged because the controllers ended up, slipping out of their hands and smack bang into the center of the television.
Yeah, well, there's enough warnings to say wear the wrist strap.
Yep. But I mean, that was a big thing, when that particular console first came out as well.
Oh, bro, 1.5% through the campaign. We're gonna be done in no time.
Did you see? Could you look about that TV I saw on my For You page? It was like transparent, so you can see. It was like PNG video, so you can see what was behind your TV, because the thing actually, it was clear glass, but the picture was on the screen still.
Yeah.
What company was that?
Believe it was Hisense.
Why in the world would they make that?
Who wants blacks when you can have clears?
Well, I was just thinking, if you had it in a pitch black room, it would be like the blackest blacks.
Yes.
Because there'd be no light.
Yes. You'd have to get your wall painted with Vanta black though.
That's worth. If you're buying that TV,
True.
you might have enough money to paint your wall painted black.
And that would actually be the blackest blacks. Be blacker than OLED.
Or you just take this up into space and just chuck it in the void.
Chuck it in the void.
Oh no, it was Xiaomi.
Xiaomi. Oh, the same people with
launched
the Mi phone.
the transparent television.
Television.
So I wonder how they
Mass-produced transparent television. There has been transparent TVs in the past.
How do we get out of the
But
police
this is
station?
the first actual mass-produced unit.
No, that vehicle will not get us out of the police station. I've tried.
Just looking up the specs and the information on it. It is actually OLED.
Huh.
Which is what probably gives the TV the actual ability to be useful, because most of the TVs like this in the past, the actual vividness of the image was very poor because of the fact that it didn't use that sort of technology.
Do they mention any use cases where they've made it for?
Not really. I mean, it's probably more gimmicky than anything at this stage. I mean, if it gets developed better, it will have some obviously advantages.
Make a pretty
Just
sick wall.
depends on how bright the actual image can get.
That's what I was thinking.
Like in Back to the Future, when they have that, like in the future, they had the wallpaper that was like a TV. And they could turn it off and see through it, but it was gross. But like then they could change what was on it, so they could.
I don't
do,
remember that one. All I remember about the Back to the Future is the shoes. Shoes in the car.
It was in the
Power
same,
laces and the
same
hoverboard.
No, it was the same movie as that one too.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, and the 3D shark thing.
Yeah, that
Pretty
one.
Yeah, pretty sure they had like a version of that at Disney World when I went. That they had like a 3D where they use like mist. They would like put the light in the mist. So
Oh
it's
yeah.
Like, yeah. Remember that. Bit of a tangent.
Disguise booths allow you to add purchase disguises. Oh, dude, you're talking
Yeah, see,
microtransactions?
LG came up with the ambient mode, which was basically utilized the TV to basically look like as if it was part of the wall. So if you had a pattern on the wall itself, it'd actually just basically display that pattern across the screen, so it sort of blended in. But it wasn't actually transparent as such. but this is actually transparent.
So that, to me, that makes far more sense than what the transparent TV is.
I mean, as far as it goes, I mean, I don't really see this sort of stuff being useful in that sort of situation. I would love for this stuff to be more utilized in things like actually as windows, where, and not necessarily having image on it, but having the ability to basically controlling it with obviously a smart device, where you can actually have it where it'll go to like a frosted glass mode, where you can't sort of see in or see out. You know, for privacy. So you could actually utilize that instead of actually having to have sort of fixed window coverings.
How do
I don't know how well it would actually produce black.
I guess if it can just turn...
Being OLED, I mean, it'll turn off, but I mean, if it turns off...
Wouldn't it be transparent?
It'd still be transparent, so...
Oh, dude, look.
I mean, it would look very holographic to some extent.
Yes, you did it.
It'd be interesting to actually just have, you know, an actual look at one in real life to see what it actually looked like. But I mean, yeah, it to me doesn't really... Yeah. The image that they've got, which is really weird, shows actually the... I'll just transition over to it. It actually looks like that you can like sort of see the item sort of floating in the middle of the display, but it's not really very detailed. Like, it's got very black edges on it, but I'm wondering whether or not that'd actually show up properly, being that there is actually no...
true.
Like, if you have a look, the way that it's set up...
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how well that'd work, or how that'd actually translate into real
That
life.
looks sick as fuck, but I highly doubt it'd look like that.
Yes.
That's what I think. I think it's more of a mock-up
Yes,
situation.
I want that. Where's the motorbike coming in?
I think it's very more mock-up than it is actually reality. And it'd be interesting to see how it'd actually look.
Can you hijack the trains?
I mean, if they can do that, but like multi-layers with a
bro.
3D, they could just replace cashiers with 3D TV things. Transparent.
How do you... I think I killed the driver, but I can't...
Yeah, I think the reality... I mean, as far as
Oh!
it goes, it would be a decent little screen to have as a like a sort of smart mirror type design.
Yeah, true that.
Because you could easily put a mirror in behind that and have sort of smart mirror sort of effect. That, I think, would be a decent use case for it. Whether or not that'd actually be cost effective, interesting.
I want to know how in the world they make transparent LEDs and still get power to them. Or is it not LEDs? Well, it would have to be if it's OLED.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. They'd have to use... They'd still have to have some sort of ability to send the signal to each individual...
Yeah. Maybe they've got wireless LEDs.
Well, unless they've got some really fine mesh wiring system built into it.
Could be.
What the... Why am I not controlling... Why am I being driven around? Why does this keep happening?
But yeah, I mean, as far as it goes, it looks very futuristic. And I mean, you're going to get essentially people buying this, you know, as a...
Name?
You know...
Talking piece.
Yeah, it's purely for the people that essentially are going to have money to burn and nothing to spend it on.
Same.
But I mean, they have put some effort into the actual TV itself. Like, the actual base actually has some pretty decent, you know, sound system built into it. They've actually, by the sounds of it, from what I'm reading in relation to the actual screen, you know, decent sort of soundbar type technology into the actual base. Not just, you know, thrown in a pair of, you know, clunky, you know, tinny speaker system.
Yes, 2 out of 450.
It looks like they've actually, from what I'm reading on here, I did read it in the section of here that it had actually decent sort of speakers in it. The cylinder base that it stands on, which is about the size of a compact disc. Sort of piece of then glass just basically sticks straight out of it. Yeah. Images that appear to be floating in the air is their description.
Because it'd have to be tailored video as well. You couldn't just play any video and expect it to be transparent. You'd have to have like with the alpha background.
Yeah, I mean, it could be using some sort of AI technology to remove the background.
That'd be next level.
I mean, it's that would probably be something that they probably haven't really perfected yet, though.
No.
Because I know that the TV that Hisense, I think, was working on was actually to use a 1080p LED panel that basically used AI to make just a standard static black and white sort of version of the image, and then put in front of that a 4K panel that had full color.
Yeah.
So that way then when the obviously light was switched to black on both panels, the actual contrast was boosted because only 0.03 nits of light could actually pass through, which basically gave you almost OLED-like color accuracy and color depth, but at like a quarter of the cost of production. I don't know if they ever actually went into full development of it, but yeah, it'd be interesting.
How'd you get in?
Jumped over where that vine is there.
Oh, jeez.
So, I mean, apart from that, the only other bit of tech news that's been coming out is the rumored 24 gig RTX graphics card that's been...
I know about that.
Yeah, there's rumor that there's a 24 gig RTX card coming out. They're not exactly sure what card it's going to be.
RTX Titan 2.
That's the theory.
RTX Quadro.
Yeah, it just turns out to just be a casual leather Quadro.
It's going to be an interesting situation as to what sort of level card that they're actually talking about, because there's no actual official information, obviously.
But we're so close to it now, we could probably just hold our breath.
That's it. I mean, as far as it goes, I don't think this generation we're going to have TI or Super branding out of the box.
Oh no, there'll be refreshes once AMD have something to compete with, and then they'll overtake them again.
I'm sort of thinking that they may come out with those sort of cards if they can switch to TSMC's manufacturing process. Ampere has been built on both, essentially, processing nodes. Over at Samsung's 8nm is the rumor currently. And of course, over at TSMC, they're obviously doing the high-end Ampere card. So it wouldn't surprise me if that once, Apple move over to 5nm production and there's some freed up space on the 7nm node, that NVIDIA may actually have already, if not done so, they might look at buying up some more fab space and then bringing out refreshed versions of the cards based on a TSMC manufacturing process. That's sort of my theory. And then, of course, they'll then rebrand those as TIs or Supers. I do think that the rumor of a 3090 series card is definitely going to come out. I think that that's so that they can sort of readjust the pricing stack a little bit.
Yep.
I think that that's what they're going to do.
Yes, important police business.
Basically bring out that card at a price point somewhere between the, sort of 2080 Ti versus the, Titan, sort of somewhere in between, with the current, obviously, new lineup that they're bringing out. But it's really all hearsay at the moment. We'll know probably soon enough. I do doubt, though, that we're going to see any TI variant card out of the box. I think they're going to hold those TI cards as sort of trump cards up their sleeve, so they can sort of work out what AMD's got when they launch, and then come out with a launch of something bigger again. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. I mean, the information that I've sort of been led to believe that AMD's graphics card looks like to be a 16 gig variant on the top end. So we'll have to wait and see what that's going to look like. It'd be interesting to see how it performs, because if they can get a card out there that not necessarily absolutely demolishes like a Titan series card, but at least the mainstream card. I don't look at Titans as actually gaming cards. They're prosumer cards. You don't buy a Titan to play computer games. That's just not the way that they work. They're designed to be production workhorses, not consumer gaming cards. As much as they are marketed to the gamer, they're not really gaming cards. They can, but you don't spend $3,000+
The Titan V Gaming XT Ultra Master.
Yeah, you don't.
It's
You
my
don't
favorite
spend that sort of
graphics card, bro. I've got like 4 of them at home. I have to bring them in one day.
As far as it goes, yeah, you don't spend that sort of money on a gaming card. That's where you own a business that did something that required that sort of workhorse. Whether it be stitching aerial photos together or doing production work, animation, that sort of stuff, where you could justify the obviously cost of it. It'll make its money back within a couple of years. But this generation of graphics cards is definitely going to be a bit of a step up from what we've seen from the 10 series to the 20 series, where we basically got a feature upgrade, not a performance upgrade. They just added features to the cards essentially. Ray tracing, obviously. It'll be interesting to see how AMD's ray tracing will stack up against
Well, they'd have
NVIDIA's.
to include an X and a T and
At
an
least.
R in there somewhere to make sure that their marketing's as expensive as NVIDIA's. Sorry.
It's going to be hard for AMD, I think, to try and get the mind share, because they've got to consistently bring out products.
RTRX. RXRT, Radeon ray tracing, and they're using like 2 R's, a T, and an X.
That's big dollars, bro.
Dude, they're gonna have to spend so much money on them boxes.
Yeah, but as far as it goes, like I said, it's AMD can't just be the best. They've got to be the best consistently, I think, for at least a generation or two before they'll get the market share and the mind share.
But I think it'll be good to see like AMD's ray tracing will sort of set more of a precedent than NVIDIA's like Minecraft will, because the hardware ray tracing is on the consoles, which is obviously AMD. So most games are going to be cross-platform, like they always, like they're getting more and more like that these days.
Yeah.
So we're going to see more ray tracing, but it's going to be optimized for consoles as well as PC. So
that'll be the main case. Yeah. For the most part, and I think that's where it's going to be the hard sell. I think trying to charge more for these cards isn't going to be an option for both NVIDIA or AMD, especially considering that you got to remember that there's 20% almost unemployment almost around the world at the moment, if not higher, and that's only going to probably increase as time goes on. The market that we will in end of last year versus the market we are going to be in at the end of this year is a completely different market to what they were probably anticipating, especially even the consoles. You look at it, it's one of those situations where those consoles, when they were originally looking at them, the economy was going well when they first started sort of putting these final design steps into place ready for launch this year. And of course, in the space of 12 months, that the market that they were anticipating to launch into is now completely different to what it was. You know, when they were sort of coming up with the concepts of the performance and the pricing and all that sort of stuff. Because I mean, these companies don't do it, you know, overnight. These companies have been developing these products for a good couple of years, especially with the custom silicon that they've utilized. It's not like that they've done it, you know, without, you know, planning and thought going into it. But, you know, had to have a situation where, you know, they were looking at, you know, decent employment rate, you know, people had jobs, they had money, that sort of situation. And then leading into the end of this year where that's completely now changed.
It's the fucking F team. Not even the A team, B, C. Ooh, that's also the go button.
Anyone else see anything they thought was interesting?
Not really. It's been a pretty slow week.
Yeah, I mean, it has been, but I mean, that's normally the situation. That's the calm before the storm, with, you know, obviously a lot of tech coming out of both Nvidia, AMD, and I mean, obviously even Tiger Lake launching later this year with Intel, and their big, you know, sort of deep dive into that. They you know, sort of even their deep dive into their Z graphics was quite interesting on what they're looking at producing, but I believe that they're going to be too late to the market. I think that the product, if it was launching end of this year in its entirety, they'd have a competing product, but I think that their Z graphics is going to be 12 months too late to the market. It'll have some obviously use case, especially if you're looking at getting a situation where, you know, you don't want to obviously support, you know, AMD or Nvidia, so to speak. They'll probably integrate some of their graphics designs into laptops, especially the ultra portable devices, you know, where you don't have the power budget to put in a high-end card. If you're already licensing the CPU from, you know, Intel, then, you know, Intel might bundle the GPU Z graphics as an bundled upgrade, you know, sort of thing, to try and get market share, which, I mean, isn't uncommon. I mean, you look at it from most of those perspectives, that the cost of integrating some of those graphic cards, they, depending on how many they purchase, they can get decent deals based on how many units they're wanting to sell and that sort of stuff. So it's since Intel having that sort of advantage to sort of bundle their own graphics with their own CPUs, be an interesting situation. Be not that I'm sort of seeing much in terms of the performance, you know, from what will probably be available, you know, in the next generation APUs from AMD, and also the next, you know, low-end graphics cards from Nvidia. It's going to be, again, another situation where, unless they can get volume production up, which is going to be hard because their fabs just can't keep up with demand now. I mean, the 10 series is launched, what, how many months ago now? It was, what, 2, 3? And still, try and find yourself a 10600K. They don't exist. Like, you can't get one. They have been on basically back order on our website now, you know, in the local market, pre-ordered for nearly the last 3 months.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the only chip that nearly every tech vendor has recommended, price to performance, and yet no one can get one. You know, it's made that particular CPU hard to sort of recommend because you can't get one, and if you can, it's at an inflated cost. But it's, you know, it's one of those situations where it's more of a, again, paper launch from Intel. You know, obviously don't have enough, obviously, ability to produce to keep up with their current demand. I mean, even their high-end desktop platform in the 10 series, even still today, trying to get a hold of stock of those is almost impossible. It does make make it very difficult to recommend products to consumers when they can't get a hold of them. I mean, similar to the 3300X, but I mean, at least I've actually seen stock of that coming through. I still haven't seen a 10600K in almost, like I said, since it paper launched.
Why are they all clowns?
I don't know.
So, have we got anything else to discuss this week? Obviously, Samsung launching their Note 20 and their new flip phone. I mean, yep, look like the same as last year.
Yeah. Oh, and their headset, the news and those cancelling chip they put in it.
Yeah.
Oh, it also had the can now pair it to 2 devices.
What?
These.
Those ones?
Yeah, the M3, the M4 ones you can.
Paired to 2 different devices at once.
Yeah.
Oh, I needed that in my life.
I couldn't think of anything I'd use it for, to be honest.
Sorry?
I couldn't think of anything that I'd use it for.
Well, I always switch between my computer and my phone. Like when I go out for a diary, and I gotta hold the button for fucking 10 seconds to switch it, get it into pairing mode to repair with my phone.
True.
Because it pairs so quickly that if you just turn it on, it just instantly connects to my computer and it's up and running in like a second.
I think we'll end this stream there. We'll catch us all next week.
Yep.
Hopefully more timely.
Yeah. And with some more stuff to talk about, eh?
Yeah.
Catch us later. Bye.